Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and today I'm here to do another round of If You Like This, You Should Read That. This time it's a science fiction edition. I've done this before for horror, so I'm going to link those videos down below. But essentially, I think most of you know how this works. I'm going to be talking about a really popular book and then recommending a book that I feel is a little more underhyped that has a similar feel to it, a similar plot, or just reminded me of it when I was reading that other book. As always, I'm sure people are going to disagree, and none of these books are exact replicates of the other book that I'm going to be talking about, but hopefully I'll give you some good recommendations. I chose some booktube favorites when it comes to science fiction, so even if you don't read a lot of the genre, I have a feeling you've read these, and hopefully you're like me and are just looking for books with a similar feel. So hopefully this works well for you and is a lot of fun. Let's get started. First, let's talk about The Martian by Andy Weir, which is set in the near future and follows an astronaut who is left behind on Mars and has to survive until NASA can find out that he is alive and make a plan to bring him home. I think most people know about this book because it was turned into a movie and is just such a beloved piece of science fiction, and so many books have been marketed for fans of The Martian, and so many of them are huge disappointments. So I was really happy that I found one that actually worked. And so the book I want to recommend is a science fiction thriller called Saturn Run by John Sanford and Cline. This is also set in the near future, so a similar setup, and follows a group of astronomers that discover that there is something headed towards Saturn. It is decelerating, which is something that objects do not naturally do. So they believe that it is possibly an alien civilization, and so there is a race between the Americans and the Chinese to both get rockets headed out to Saturn to find out what or who is there. And again, this has a different setup, so it's not the exact same, but it definitely has some of the similar elements. So first off, it has a really good narrative drive. It is one of those books where you will just keep turning the pages because you want to know what is happening. You want to know what is actually at Saturn, and the mystery is really good. This book also has a lot of humor. I would say The Martian is funnier, but this one definitely has a lot of good banter between the characters. They are often very jokey as they are trying to puzzle through these different things, and that's the part that really was similar for me, was the fact that they had to figure out how to get a rocket to Saturn as quickly as possible. And so you have a group of scientists that are trying to puzzle out something using science, and that reminded me a lot of The Martian. Definitely less potatoes in Saturn Run, but if you want a similar page-turning thriller that has a lot of humor, has a lot of characters at the focus of it, and both books have a lot of hard science written into it, but it's written in a way that's really accessible to a regular reader, even someone that doesn't have a science background like myself. So highly recommend both of them. They are just enjoyable reads, and I was really happy that Saturn Run actually gave me Martian vibes, which is just a wonderful thing because, again, so many books that are marketed as being similar have let me down. Next, I want to talk about The Calculating Stars by Robinette Kowal, which is the first book in the Lady Astronaut series, and this is actually historical science fiction because it's set a little bit in the past, and there is a meteor strike that causes huge cataclysmic change in our environment, which is going to make the Earth inhabitable sooner than we would like it to be. So this causes the different governments to accelerate their space programs because we need to start making plans to get off of the Earth sooner than later. And in doing so, they have to bring in female astronauts, and so we get to see females playing a larger role in the space program much sooner than we did in actual history. This story is told primarily from the perspective of Alma, who is a math whiz. She is a pilot, and she is reluctantly brought into the program, and you get to see her personal journey, but also the larger plans of, again, the governments as they are trying to get us off the Earth and just continue our exploration of space. I think this one is a bit of a booktube darling, so I'm hoping that you have read this one. And the book that I would like to compare it to is Seven Eves by Neil Stephenson, which certainly is a popular book in and of itself, but I don't feel like as many people have read it. And this book definitely gave me similar vibes. This one is actually set in a near future, so it's not historical, but a similar event has caused the moon to explode, which means that the Earth once again is going to become uninhabitable, and on a much quicker timeline in this one. So what humanity and the different governments have to do is create a plan to basically continue on our legacy. They are trying to determine how to get as many people off Earth and as much DNA as possible so that we can actually continue on humanity on another planet. This book is told over a few different timelines. We get to see the preparations as they're trying to get off the planet and then their journey away from Earth. So this one kind of takes a similar concept, but is more focused on the larger picture, more focused on what humanity has to do. This one is told over multiple perspectives, and we definitely do get to spend some time with the characters, but because there are time jumps, we don't follow one character, and it's perhaps not as character focused because you'll learn a lot about a character, but then there's a time jump and you don't necessarily see all of those characters again. Now, I should mention that I read this on audio, and both the books are actually narrated by the same person, Robinette Kowal, and her narration definitely contributed to me finding similarities between the two books, but I honestly do think that there are a lot of similar threads. The Calculating Stars is more of a personal story, more of an intimate take on a woman and her friends as they are trying to go into the space program, while again, Seven Eves is a little bit more big picture and a little bit more epic in scale. But either way, I think they're great books and definitely ones that I would recommend. If you've read one, read the other. Next, let's talk about Ready Player One by Ernest Cline, which is set in a dystopian future where there is a place called the Oasis, which is a VR that is kind of like Facebook and all of our social media combined. And people go and escape into the Oasis because the actual world is really in decline and is suffering from a lot of poverty. And of course, this story follows Will Watts, who is a young man who is trying to puzzle together this Easter egg hunt in order to get control over the Oasis. And as you know, this book is full of 80s references. It's very nerdy and geeky, and it is basically just a really fun adventure. And I think everyone knows it. Again, it was made into a movie, so it got really popular. And I was really pleased to find a book that I thought reminded me a lot of it. Now, the book that I want to recommend is We Are Legion, We Are Bob by Dennis Taylor. And this is a story of a man who becomes very wealthy and uses his wealth to pay to have his brain saved in order to revive himself in the future when technology is able to save him. So he ends up in a car accident and then wakes up in the far future. They are not able to save his body, but they are able to save his mind, and they put it inside of an artificially intelligent computer simulation. And so he is able to continue on, and he's basically a replication of his initial mind. However, in this future, he basically is forced to work as an indentured servant because of the future government and so forth. And in his role, he has to become a replicating artificial intelligence. And so he actually creates multiple versions of himself. And that's why the series is called the Bobbyverse. And so within this universe, he is going to do different tasks. He is exploring the universe and making multiple copies of himself. From that synopsis, you're probably wondering why I'm comparing it to Ready Player One. So I'll be clear that the plots are fairly different. There is no Easter egg hunt. There is no puzzle. There is no oasis in this world. But both these books do deal in a way with virtual reality and intelligence, because in this world, Bob does not have a body, so he has to kind of create a virtual environment for him to live and to keep his mind active. The real reason that I want to recommend these two books together is that We Are Bob is filled with nerdy pop culture references. Because he's replicating himself, he can't call all of his replications Bob, so instead he starts to call them other names. And if you are a geeky person yourself, you'll recognize the names like Riker and Goku. And he just draws from so many different places in geeky culture. So if you enjoyed those aspects of Ready Player One, I think you'll enjoy this one as well. Now, I also want to mention that these books both have really fantastic audiobook narration. I think for a lot of you probably read Ready Player One via the audiobook, which is done by Will Wheaton and is quite well known. And this other book also has a fantastic performance that really does elevate the book. This one is done by Ray Porter. I do think that Ready Player One is a stronger book, but if you're looking for something similar, again, a very geeky experience, I definitely recommend checking out this book. It's the start of a series and was just a really fun ride. Next, let's talk about Dark Matter by Blake Crouch, which is about a man who is having a family night with his wife and son. He goes off to get ice cream and does not come back. He is held up by gunpoint and that person takes him away. And when he wakes up, everything is different. I'm really hesitant to say too much in case you have not read this book. It's really one to discover for yourself. But I think for those of you that have read this book, you are probably like me and also looking for something similar, and I'm happy to have a really good recommendation for this one. The book that I want to recommend is Here, Now, and Then by Mike Chen, which is set actually back in the 90s and follows a man who is from the future. He is a time-traveling agent, but he had to go back to the 90s to do a job, and something went wrong and he got stuck there. And so he ended up actually finding a new wife and having a child and basically creating a life for himself. Now, years later, when his daughter is now a teenager, he is found by the agents that are taking him home to the future so that he can continue his actual life. By this point, he is now torn between these two worlds and is definitely trying to decide whether or not he should continue with his past life or his present, and you get to see the turmoil that he deals with. Now, this one definitely has a different aspect of science than Dark Matter, so don't worry, I'm not spoiling the plot here. But what this book has in common with Dark Matter is the fact that it's very family-centric. So you have a science fiction thriller, which does have a good amount of science fiction in it, as well as some thrilling moments. But really, at the heart of both stories, it's about a man trying to come home to his family. And if you really liked the heart aspects of Dark Matter, then I think you'll really appreciate them in this one. I'll say that Mike Chen's book is not as thrilling, it's not as action-packed. There definitely are some slower moments where he is back in what he considers his present or future and is getting to know the person that he was with in that timeline. And so there's some moments where they are cooking and getting to know each other. So again, it's not non-stop action, which Dark Matter is a little bit faster paced, but definitely it gets more thrilling towards the end. And again, just has that emotional punch that I really enjoyed in Dark Matter and really grounded the story. And I think you'll find that as well in this one. Finally, I want to recommend a book for those of you that love A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, which is the first book in the Wayfarers series. This follows a ragtag group of people living on a ship, and they are tasked with basically making space highways to connect different planets together. At the beginning of the story, they get a new crew member, and the story is very slow paced, and it's more so about the characters than the plot, and is really about learning about different alien cultures and just breaking down our understanding of current human norms. And it's just a very wonderful, inclusive, diverse piece of science fiction. And I do have to admit that no one is quite like Becky Chambers when it comes to writing her stories, but I have something that I think is pretty close, and that is the Axiom Trilogy that starts with The Wrong Stars, all written, of course, by Tim Pratt. And this series has some definite similarities to it. This is set in a future where there's also a ragtag group of people. This time they are salvagers, and they come across an old generational ship that has somehow wandered back into our solar system. And they find a woman on that ship, and when they wake her up, she tells them that there is an ancient alien race out there and they are possibly coming for humanity. So I like to recommend this book specifically to those of you that liked the Wayfarers series, but felt that The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet did not have as much plot as you wanted. That was my personal preference. I loved everything about it, but I wanted more plot because I found that it was kind of lacking in that area and didn't have a lot of narrative drive. This one brings in the same elements that you will love so much in the Wayfarer series. So you have a group of characters that are very diverse. You will see different queer representations, including a bisexual character, a lesbian character. You get to see a character that has an amputation, and just different characters that eat differently and behave differently and have a different understanding of gender and self and identity. and all of those inclusive things that Becky Chambers does so well. And also I would say that despite this book having more of a dire plot, certainly there are some stakes involved with this ancient alien race possibly coming for us. At the same time, I feel like Tim Pratt still does a really good job of making the future optimistic. This is not a dystopian, humanity hasn't gone downhill. Instead, it's very positive, something like Star Trek, where we have an enlightened future where we are generally not terrible human beings. And I just really loved the optimism in this one. So it had similar feelings, but more plot. So if you're looking for something like Becky Chambers, but more of that space opera feel, I highly recommend this whole trilogy. It's very accessible and easy to get into, just like hers, and I just love it. So definitely recommend it. So that is it for this video. Let me know how I did. Are you planning on picking up any of the books I recommended here? And if you have already read them, I would love your opinions down below. Do you agree or disagree with the pairings I put together? Or do you have better recommendations? I would love to hear them. And let me know if you enjoyed this kind of video. I really enjoy putting them together, but I want to know if you enjoy watching them. Should I do another one based around science fiction, or would you even be interested if I did this for fantasy? Of course, I'll keep doing it for horror because I know you all enjoy that as much as I do. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't yet subscribed and enjoy videos like this, consider joining the group and give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you don't miss a video. Thanks for watching. Talk to you soon. Okay, bye-bye.